I know people are going to judge me the moment I say this out loud. And I mean, the second the words leave my mouth. But that morning, the morning Ezekiel left without a word, without a note, without even shutting the front door all the way behind him, part of me breathed, like genuinely exhaled. And that part of me, that quiet, shameful, relieved part, is the one that has never let me sleep right since. Not in 10 years, not once. Okay, wait. I need you to stay with me because what I'm about to tell you is not the story I've been telling people. Not my mother, not my therapist, and yes, I had one for 3 years paid out of pocket, which, if you know my situation back then, that should tell you something. Not even Seraphine, and Seraphine knows everything about me. Everything. Except this. And by the end of what I'm telling you right now, you'll understand why. Because there's a layer underneath the layer I already showed you, and then there's one underneath that. And by the time we get to the bottom, trust me, it changes everything. Every single thing. So, I was 24. I know that's how I am right now, but back then, 24 felt enormous. Like I was standing at the edge of my own life looking in. I had just moved into the apartment on Carver Lane. You know the one. Old building, radiators that sounded like someone was arguing inside the walls, 2 windows facing east, so the mornings came in hard and gold and almost violent. Beautiful, actually. I loved those mornings even when I hated everything else. Ezekiel and I had been together for 2 years and 8 months. I know the exact number because I'd counted. I was always counting things about him. The days since our first fight. The number of times he said, "I love you" in a week. The number of times he didn't. 3. The average was 3, in case you're wondering. Sometimes 4. Once, during a really good week in March, 7. I remember the 7. I remember it the way you remember a high you'll never quite hit again. He wasn't cruel. I want to make sure I say that. I get so tired of stories where the man is a monster, and that makes the leaving clean. He wasn't a monster. He was something harder to explain. He was a man who loved me the way you love a song that you've heard too many times. Still beautiful, still real, but something in the listening had gone quiet. We met through Seraphine, actually. She'll probably kill me for telling this part. She had this little gathering at her place. Seraphine throws these gatherings, not parties. She hates the word party. She says it implies chaos, and she prefers what she calls curated chaos, which honestly describes her perfectly. And if you knew Seraphine, you would understand immediately, because she is the kind of woman who rearranges the furniture in her own apartment every 3 months, not because something is wrong, but because she says stagnant arrangements produce stagnant thinking. And I don't entirely disagree. And anyway, the point is, she had this gathering, and Ezekiel showed up with her cousin Malachi, who I had been very briefly interested in before I saw Ezekiel standing by the bookshelf with a glass of something dark, reading the spine of a novel like he was solving a riddle. That was it for me. I know. I know how that sounds, but sometimes a person's posture is a whole entire argument for their existence. And his posture said, I am someone who finds things interesting. And I was 21 and starving for interesting. No, wait. I keep saying 21. I was 22. We met when I was 22. The 2 years and 8 months brings us to almost 25, but he left when I was 24, closer to the beginning of month 9. I'm sorry, I do this. I circle the details because if I get the details wrong, the whole thing starts to feel like I'm misremembering it. And I need to not misremember this. I need this to be exact. So, 2 years and 8 months, the apartment on Carver Lane, the radiators, the gold mornings. He left on a Tuesday. I had gone to bed the night before knowing something was wrong, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the way you know your body is getting sick before the sickness actually arrives. Just a low hum of wrongness. He'd been on his phone more than usual. Not secretively, just absently. Like the phone was more real than the room. He kissed me on the cheek before sleep, not the mouth, and I told myself that was nothing. People kiss cheeks. Couples settle into cheeks. That's not evidence of anything. But then he was gone. The door was open about 4 inches. Not wide open, just that 4-inch gap. And I stood in the hallway in my socks looking at that gap for a long time. 4 inches of morning. 4 inches of the hallway outside. The faint sound of someone else's television from 3B. And I breathed. That's the thing I couldn't tell anyone. That's the confession that has lived inside me since. Because what do you do with that? What do you do when the absence of a person who loved you, who you loved, lands in your chest like something loosening, like a knot you forgot was there. I cried, yes. Eventually, that came. But first there was that breath, and it was real, and I've never been able to make it mean something acceptable. Here's what I told everyone. I was devastated, confused, blindsided. And those things were also true. They were true the way a photograph of a fire is true, accurate but not warm. Now, I need to stop here for just a second. If you're watching this and you've stuck with me this far, I see you, and I mean that. Please take 2 seconds and subscribe if you haven't. Leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever felt relieved by a loss? Have you ever felt something that scared you more than the loss itself? Because I read every single one, and I need to know I'm not the only one who has lived inside this particular kind of shame. Okay, back. I called Seraphine first, obviously. And here's where I need you to go back to something I said earlier. Actually, go further back. Remember how I said Seraphine knows everything about me except this? Sit with that, because I'm about to show you exactly where the exception lives. What I told Seraphine that morning, Ezekiel was gone, I didn't know where, I was scared, I was hurt, could she come over? What I didn't tell Seraphine, 3 days before he left, I found something. No, wait, let me go further back than that, because the 3 days is only the surface. The real thing starts 6 weeks earlier on a Sunday. I need to rebuild this for you properly. 6 weeks before Ezekiel left, we had a fight. Not a big one of those small, tight fights where nothing is said directly and everything is said anyway. It was about time. About how I felt like I was always making time for us and he was always letting time happen. He said I was controlling. I said I was present. He said there was a difference between being present and needing presence back like a transaction. And that one landed. That one I had to take a breath around. Because there was some truth in it, and I hated that there was some truth in it. I said something about how you can't just accept love passively and call that a relationship. He said he didn't accept it passively, he just expressed it differently. I said, then express it. He looked at me for a long time. He didn't say anything. That silence was its own kind of answer, and neither of us named it. Nobody won. We went to sleep not touching, which in our apartment with that bed meant approximately 4 inches of distance, same as the door. I wonder about that sometimes. The 4 inches. After that fight, something changed in me. Not dramatically, but I started paying attention differently. I started noticing the seams of things. And 6 weeks later, 3 days before he vanished, I was in the kitchen very early. One of those mornings where sleep just decides it's done with you, and his phone was on the counter, charging, just sitting there. And I want to be honest with you, I did not intend to look. I didn't wake up that morning planning to look. I reached past it to get to the cabinet above and the screen lit up. Notification, that was all. But what I saw in the notification, not the message, just the preview, just the name and the first 6 words, stopped me cold. The name was Orenthal. I did not know anyone named Orenthal. In 2 years and 8 months, I had met cousins, co-workers, old friends, college roommates, the guy he played ball with on Thursdays. None of them were Orenthal. And yet here was this name on his screen at 5:47 in the morning, and the first 6 words of the message were, "You need to tell her before..." Before what? I put the phone down. I made coffee. I stood at the window and watched the light change. And I did not pick up the phone, and I did not read the rest of the message, and I did not say a word to Ezekiel when he woke up 40 minutes later and kissed me, on the mouth that morning, which I noted, and poured himself coffee and asked me how I slept. I said fine. He said you were up early. I said couldn't sleep. He said same actually, I was up around 3. He wasn't lying, I believed him. And I also believed that at some point between 3 and 5:47, someone named Orenthal had sent him a message about what he needed to tell me before something. I chose not to ask. I want to own that. That was a choice I made. And I have thought about that choice approximately every other day for 10 years. Here's the part I really haven't told anyone. The part that comes after. 2 days after the notification, 1 day before he left, I came home from work and his bag was in the closet. Not packed, not ostentatiously out, just there, the same green canvas bag he always kept in the back corner, the one he used for weekends when he visited his mother. It was on the upper shelf instead of the floor. That was the difference. 12 inches higher than usual. I told you I was always counting. I said nothing. I made dinner. We watched something on television. He fell asleep on the couch with his feet in my lap, which was such an achingly ordinary thing to do, and I sat there for 40 minutes with the weight of his feet and the television going quietly, and I thought, tomorrow this is going to change. I didn't know how. I didn't know what. But I knew. The way you know your body is getting sick. When he was gone and I'd called Seraphine and she'd come over and held me while I finally cried, there was a point, maybe 2 hours in, where she said, "Did he say anything? Leave anything?" And I said no. That was a lie. I mean, it was almost true. He hadn't left a note. He hadn't said anything to my face. But what I did not tell Seraphine, what I have not told anyone in 10 years, is that there was a voice note. He had left his phone, not intentionally, at least I don't think intentionally. It was on the kitchen counter, same spot as 3 days before, and I saw it there when I woke up and first understood he was gone. I assumed he'd panicked or forgotten or left in such a hurry that the phone was just left. An accident. But the voice note was recording. The app was open. The little red circle was going. And I don't know when it started. I don't know if it started before he left or sometime after. I don't know if the button was pressed by accident or on purpose. But by the time I picked up the phone, there were 43 minutes of audio. I'm going to pause here because I need you to understand. I almost didn't listen. There was a moment, a genuine moment, where I held that phone and thought about deleting it without listening, because some part of me already understood that whatever was in those 43 minutes was the kind of thing you cannot unknow. And I had already survived 2 hours in the apartment without him. I was functional. Seraphine was coming. I listened. The first 18 minutes were silence, more or less. Ambient sound. I think he was walking. There's a quality to that silence, a rhythm. Wind, maybe, or just movement. I sat on the bathroom floor with the phone and listened to 18 minutes of a man walking away from me. I sat with my back against the tub, the cold of the porcelain through my shirt, and I held the phone up near my face even though I wasn't looking at it, just listening, because for some reason it felt wrong to hold it at a distance, like the distance would be a choice I was making, and I wasn't ready to choose anything yet. So I stayed close. 18 minutes. I know there were 18 because I was watching the counter the whole time, the little numbers ticking, and somewhere around minute 11 I started crying without making any noise, which is a specific kind of crying I learned from watching my grandmother. This absolute stillness of the face while everything behind it is breaking. She cried that way at funerals. I never understood it before. Then a door, a different ambient sound, indoor, muffled. Someone talking in the background, far away. Then a voice. Not Ezekiel's. This voice was slower, lower, and I recognized it the way you recognize a song you've never heard but somehow know, because it matched something I'd already been imagining. Orenthal. He said, "You tell her?" And Ezekiel said, "No." Silence. Then Orenthal said, "Zeke." The way he said it, that single syllable, there was something in it, not judgment exactly, but weight. The weight of someone who had said this before. Ezekiel said, "I know." Orenthal said, "She's going to find out." Ezekiel said, "I know that too." Another silence, longer. And then Orenthal said, "And this is the thing that rewrote everything. The thing I have carried in my body like a stone in a coat pocket for 10 years. Something I feel every time I put my hands in my pockets, every time there's unexpected weight." He said, "The problem is you love her. That's the actual problem. If you didn't, this would be easy." And Ezekiel didn't say anything for a long time. And then he said, so quietly I had to replay it 4 times to be sure, "She deserves someone who only loves her." That was the secret. That was the thing I have been sitting with. Not that he left, not the why. I figured out the why eventually, slowly, over months. There was something before me, someone before me, a situation before me that he had tried to leave and couldn't fully leave, and he had stayed with me trying to be the person he wanted to be instead of the person he was, and eventually the weight of that became its own kind of cruelty. I understood all of that. I want to make sure you hear that clearly. I understood it. Not right away. Not in the first month when I was still angry in this particular cold, focused way, the kind of angry that makes you very productive and very terrible to be around. Not in the second month, when the anger turned into something more like fog. But eventually. Understanding came the way all the slow, important things come, without announcement, without a moment you can point to. What I could not put down was the second half of what Orenthal said. That part came after a pause, after Ezekiel's reply. Orenthal said, "And she probably knows something's wrong. Women like her always know. She's just waiting for you to be brave enough to say it." Women like her. I have never known what that meant. I have constructed, over 10 years, approximately 40 different interpretations of women like her. Perceptive women, patient women, proud women, women who count things, women who notice bags moved 12 inches up a shelf, women who hear a door left 4 inches open and breathe, women who listen to 43 minutes of a recording on a bathroom floor and then get up and wash their faces and make coffee before their best friend arrives. Women who perform okayness so well that everyone who loves them is slightly deceived. Women who need, quietly and consistently, to be someone's whole thing and not just the beautiful part of a complicated thing. I don't know which kind Orenthal meant. I don't know if he knew Ezekiel had said the same thing to me 100 different ways. Not in words, but in the way he sometimes looked at me across a room like he was apologizing for something he hadn't done yet. I noticed that look. I told myself it was just the way he was, some internal weather that had nothing to do with me. But I was counting, and I knew the truth, and I chose not to know the truth out loud. That choice is mine too. I carry that. I deleted the voice note that morning before Seraphine arrived. I told no one. I let everyone believe what they needed to believe, that I had been blindsided, that there was no warning, that it was a mystery and a wound and a sudden thing. And it was all of those things. But it was also this, a recording, 43 minutes, 2 men in a room, one of them saying that I deserved to be someone's whole thing, not a compromise, not a beautiful, beloved mistake. I've been in 2 relationships since, Obafemi, who was kind and steady, and whose kindness I confused for safety until I realized I was confusing safety for love, and they're not the same thing, I know that now. Safety is structural and love is weather. Safety is the building and love is what happens inside it, and you can have a very secure building with nothing alive in it, and that's where Obafemi and I ended up, in this perfectly maintained, perfectly quiet structure. And the day I understood that I cried for 2 hours not because I was losing him, but because I was embarrassed it had taken me so long to see. He deserved better than my confusion. He was a good man. That's not nothing. That's actually a lot. But it wasn't what either of us needed, and we both knew, and neither of us said so for 8 months. And then one Sunday over breakfast I said, "I think you know what I'm about to say." And he said, "I do." And we looked at each other with this tremendous, exhausted relief. Sound familiar? And then there was Calanthe. Yes, she. And yes, that was its own discovery, its own unlayering. And maybe that's a different story for a different time. But it matters because it is part of what Ezekiel leaving made room for in me. The breath I took at that door, I think now that it wasn't relief at his absence. I think it was relief at the permission. Permission to start counting different things. Permission to wonder what it would feel like to be someone's whole thing. I found out what happened to Ezekiel not through any dramatic reunion, not through Seraphine or Malachi or anyone who knew us both. I found out through coincidence, or whatever we're calling coincidence when the universe decides to make a point about something you thought you'd already processed. I was at a coffee place downtown, 3 years after Carver Lane, on a Thursday morning when I'd taken a half day and wasn't sure what to do with the unscheduled hours, which is its own kind of discomfort when you've spent years being the kind of person who fills every hour on purpose. I'd ordered something and found a seat, and I was doing that thing where you look at your phone without reading anything, just sort of running your eyes over words, when I overheard 2 people at the next table. One of them said a name, Ezekiel, and something in me went very still the way animals go still before rain. I didn't turn around immediately. I have some pride. I sat and I breathed and I listened. The voice, a woman's voice, someone I didn't know, said, "He's doing so much better, like genuinely, you can see it." And her companion said, "He finally seems like himself." Finally seems like himself. I turned very slightly, not enough to be obvious, just enough to confirm I didn't know either of them. I didn't. They weren't part of any world I'd been part of with him. So there was a new world, there was a life. And in that life, Ezekiel finally seemed like himself, and people who knew him noticed, and they sat in coffee shops on Thursday mornings and said so with warmth and without complication. I left without turning around all the way. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't feel nothing either. It was something in the middle, a kind of thick, slow feeling like weather that can't decide what it's going to be. And then I thought about Orenthal, about what he had said. She deserves someone who only loves her. And I thought about the fact that what Ezekiel had ultimately done, even in his cowardice, even in the leaving without a word and the door opened 4 inches and the bag moved 12 inches and all that terrible, tender evasion, what he had done was give me the same thing. He had finally seemed like himself. And in doing so, in that leaving, in that 4-inch door and that 43-minute recording and that name Orenthal on a screen at 5:47 in the morning, in all of it, he had made room for me to do the same. I'm still doing it. That's the honest ending. I'm still in the process of finally seeming like myself. Some days I'm further along than others. Some mornings I wake up in the apartment I have now, different building, no radiators, windows facing west so the mornings are gentler, which I chose on purpose. And I feel the shape of my own life and it fits. And some mornings I'm still that 24-year-old in socks, looking at a 4-inch gap and trying to understand what I'm feeling. But the breath was real. I know that now. And real is where you start. I don't forgive him for the leaving. I don't think forgiveness is the right frame. I think what I have is something closer to understanding. Not even that. Recognition. Like seeing something far away and knowing what it is without being able to read it yet. I still think about that breath sometimes, the one at the door, the one that scared me. I've decided it wasn't relief at his going. I've decided, and I reserve the right to change this, I'm 24, I'm still revising. I've decided it was the feeling of my own life becoming available to me again. Not like a gift, more like a door. 4 inches, just enough. If this story reached you somewhere real, please like it, subscribe, and drop a comment. I answer every single one, and I promise your words matter more than you know.